Good morning and welcome, everyone. We still have some people logging in, but I think we'll go ahead and launch our program. We have a lot of ground to cover today. My name is Laura Fleek. I am a programming librarian with the Fresno County Public Library, working out of the Woodward Park branch. I am very happy to welcome Roz Tampone from the Fresno Master Gardener in the first of 3 succulent programs. This is going to be very exciting and a lot of fun. She will be taking questions at the end, so feel free to type them in the chat as we go along. And without any ado, let's get going. Roz?
Well, thank you, Laura. Good morning and welcome to Under the Spell of Succulents, Part 1. Today, what I'm going to be talking about is how to identify some of the plants that you currently have in your garden, the succulents, as well as succulent care. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Roz Tampone. I've been a master gardener since 2013. I'm also a member of the Fresno Cactus and Succulent Society. I've done that since I retired in 2012. And when we got into COVID, I became a member of the Cactus and Succulent Society of America. I've learned an awful lot from people from around the world with that organization. In addition to that, I taught K-12 special ed, and I was a principal in Sanger Unified for 35 years. I married my high school sweetheart, Pete Tampone. We've been living in California since '75. We both grew up outside of New York City. And in addition to teaching gardening classes, I also enjoy photography, gardening, traveling, reading, exercise. And over the years, I've done many, many different things. But that just gives you an idea of the kinds of things that I like to do. And today, what I want to do is get started with telling you about some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. One is how you can identify some of the succulents that you're currently growing in your garden. Another will be on tips on how to grow succulents successfully. And then finally, I'd like to share with you how you can propagate your succulents and make more of them. So let me ask you a question. Do you know where succulents come from? What are their native habitats? Well, you can find them in desert wastelands. You can find them on mountaintops, in jungles, near the oceans, and even growing here in the valley. So a succulent is any plant that has a thick, fleshy water storage organ, and they can store their water in their leaves, their stems, or their roots. These plants have adapted to survive arid conditions throughout the world, from Africa to North America. They're very popular, as you can see with the number of folks that we have participating today. There are over 10,000 species worldwide, and they include about 3% of the flowering plants of the world. They're gorgeous and nearly indestructible. They have a variety of plant shapes and leaves, and like I said earlier, they're very easy to propagate. Did you know that tequila is made from agaves? And that some species are cooked and eaten as vegetables, like the saguaro cactus, barrel cactus, and aloes. Some produce mouth-watering fruits like the prickly pear cactus. Aloes can be used to treat minor cuts or burns. And aloe vera is commonly used in cosmetics. So these next few slides, what I'm going to do is talk about some of the more common succulents that you can find growing in California. And most people don't realize this, but there are both summer and winter growers. And if they're a summer grower, they're dormant in the winter. If they're a winter grower, they're dormant in the summer. One of my favorite succulents is the aeonium. It's a winter grower. Most of them come from the Canary Islands, which are off the coast of Africa. There are about 30 species of pinwheel plants. That's what they're also known as. And they really look beautiful in containers. They're really one of my favorite plants. The sunburst aeonium is probably my favorite. And the kiwi aeonium is also a very beautiful variegated plant. This aeonium urbicum is a dinner plate aeonium, and some of those can grow to 24 inches across. And I'll show you one that's gone into flower. These are some aeoniums that you can find at Succulent Gardens over in Castroville. If you're on your way to Monterey, I would certainly make a little side trip to Succulent Gardens, because you'll find just incredible finds there, as well as ideas for displaying your succulents. This dinner plate aeonium is what it looks like when it goes into bloom. And you can see it starts with very few flowers on the bottom. And during the month-long time that it takes for this flower to develop fully, you can see how it changes from day to day and over the course of weeks. It's quite stunning and beautiful. The thing with aeonium flowers is once the flower is produced, it ends up killing the plant. And so you get this beautiful flourish of flowers at the end of its life. Another really famous succulent are agaves. They're summer growers. Most of these are stemless succulents that can grow anywhere from 6 inches to 15 feet. Many of them are found in landscapes. And the thing with agaves, like aeoniums, once it flowers after 5 to 10 years, it usually dies. But the interesting thing about agaves is that they can send out pups 6 feet away from the mother plant. And there are about 450 members of the agave family. One that doesn't have a spine on it is called agave attenuata variegated. Normally on an agave, it has a very thick spine at the end of each leaf. And if you get too close to it, it can puncture your skin. But these agave attenuatas, which you really find along the coast, grow beautifully. They require more shade than the typical agaves. Aloes are beautiful succulents. There are more than 500 species that go from a dwarf size to large tree aloes. This aloe polyphylla, also known as a spiral aloe, is very rare to find. I bought one over at Succulent Gardens maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I overwatered it and it didn't last through the summer. This aloe dorothea is really quite beautiful. And if you give it a lot of sunshine, it will turn the leaves red. These are a very typical looking flower of the aloe. And usually you can tell an aloe because of some of the teeth that are located along the sides of the leaves. A lot of people confuse agaves and aloes, but agaves always have those pointed spears at the end, those spines, whereas your aloes will have teeth all along the edges. And aloes are winter growers. Crassula is also a big family of about 350 species. Most people are familiar with the jade plant. That's the Crassula ovata. They're winter growers, and they come mostly from Madagascar and Africa. They can be slower, fast growing, and they can be solitary or clumping. Dudleas are another rosette that grow along the coast of California. There are about 40 or so of these species. They produce starry yellow flowers during the summertime. They're winter growers, but there's one thing about these winter growers. They really want to be kept dry in the winter. They have been known to be confiscated from people who have been trying to steal them from all over the coast of California. I think one of the, I'm not sure which organization found them, but they had stolen about 750 different Dudleas and were trying to bring them back to Korea, where they sell for like $750 a piece. So I understand why they were trying to steal them, trying to make some money. But the fortunate thing was people from Santa Cruz were able to get the stolen Dudleas and replant them all along the coast in areas where they weren't typically grown. But they are a little bit more on the difficult side to keep alive. Echeverias are beautiful rosettes from Mexico. There are about 150 different varieties. They come in all different colors of blue, green, red, purple, or pink. These you really want to keep dry during the winter time, but they're summer growers. So now they like to be watered. The Echeveria agavoides lipstick is one of my favorite, as well as the Pearl von Nuremberg. And Echeveria elegans really produce profusely if you're able to get those to grow. Euphorbias are also summer growers. There are about 1,200 different euphorbias that you can find. You want to make sure that you handle them with gloves because they produce a milky sap called latex that can irritate your skin or cause blindness. This one is called Medusa Head. I do have one of these. I'm not sure which variety it is. It has a little bit thinner leaf to it. The Obesa, these are the flowers that it produces. The flowers are really nondescript. The flowers produce right here on the tips of the growing areas. But one of my favorite euphorbias is the Tiracali, or the sticks on fire. And these look excellent in the landscape. And if you give them a lot of sunlight, they will turn this bright orange. Most people don't know, but poinsettias are euphorbias, and these very colorful, what look like leaves are not really leaves or flowers. They're called bracts. And they have some beautiful, beautiful colors of poinsettias that people get during the Christmas time. This Euphorbia decori took first place in the Fresno Fair a few years ago. Gasterias are also an interesting winter grower. They're known as ox tongues, and the reason being is that they have opposing leaves while they're young, but they do turn into rosettes as they get a little bit older. They're related to the aloes, and so nowadays there are many varieties called gaster aloes. Those are hybridized. And these are pretty typical of what the flowers of gasterias look like. And again, they're a winter grower. What I did with this plant was I took 3 big leaves from the gasteria the Bathasiana, and I let them callus over before I planted them. I let them callus for about 2 to 3 weeks before I planted them. But about a month or two later, I started getting all these little babies growing up from it. So that's one way that you can propagate your succulents. Graptivarias are very pretty hybrids that are crosses between a graptopetalum and an echeveria. They're really difficult to identify correctly, and the cuttings can produce very, very different cuttings from the plants, from the mother plant. And these guys are winter growers also. Haworthias are another one of my favorite. They're winter growers. They're from Southern Africa, and there are about 80 species of Haworthia. The attenuata is probably one of the most common ones that you'll find, as well as the fasciata, also known as the zebra plant. The limifolia is very pretty, and how you can usually tell a Haworthia, most of them are rosettes, but they have white markings on them. This was an assorted Haworthia that I planted, probably 2 or 3 years ago. And this is what it looks like today. It produces lots of pups along the mother plant, which can be separated and made into new plants. This one is in dire need of repotting. Now, this is a very strange name, Kalanchoe. I used to pronounce it Kalancho, but I was corrected. It's Kalanchoe. It's there are about 200 species of these winter growers that are from small leafy succulents to huge tree-like plants. This mother of 1,000s right here will produce seeds all along the edges of the leaf. When these drop off, they go into all your other containers. If you plant them in the ground, they'll almost become invasive. The rhombopilosa is a very pretty, slow-growing plant. The panda plant is kind of a hairier one that's very pretty in arrangements, and the Blossfeldiana has loads of flowers. Lithops are something that I've grown to really enjoy. The neat thing about these lithops, first of all, they're summer growers. They look like stones. They come in all different colors, but they consist of a pair of flat-topped leaves. You want to keep them dry all winter. You can grow them in sand or perlite, and you want to start watering them when their leaves shrivel, and you water them until the fall. And these are native to Southern Africa and Namibia. And if you were out in the desert of Namibia, you would hardly even see these plants. But when they flower, they're quite spectacular. These are two of the lithops that I have growing in my collection. And as you can see, the daisy-like flower almost takes over the whole plant. And here you can't even see the Leslie underneath it. Sansevierias, I called them snake plants when I was living in New York. I think out here people call them the mother-in-law's tongue, but there are about 60 species of these that can be grown indoors or outdoors. And like the agave, the rosette usually dies after they flower. These are extremely frost sensitive, so you either want to cover them if you have them growing outside, or bring them indoors during the winter. And these are winter growers. Sedums are another, I think there are about 500 varieties of sedum. They're also known as stone crops, and a lot of people will use these as ground cover, but they also look really neat in hanging planters. They're winter growers. The pork and beans looks nice with lots of different other succulents that you plant with it. The lemon sedum offers a different color to them, but this firestorm, if you plant it in the sun, will deliver a beautiful, brilliant orange color. And sempervivum are summer growers. There are about 50 species of them. They're also known as hens and chicks. Their flowers are star-shaped and come in different colors of red, pink, or yellow. One of my favorites and easiest to grow is the arachnoideum. It looks like spider webs all over it, and they're really quite pretty. Senecios are also winter growers. These are like finger-like plants. There are about 1,000 species of them that are mainly grown in Africa and India. They're easy to grow, and their flowers look like red brushes or golden daisies. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about how you can care for your succulents. All succulents will need water and light to thrive and grow. They don't like to stand with wet feet, and they don't want to be in a dark office. If you give them too much summer sun, they'll scorch. So the key idea is to water them when they need it. So all succulents will need light, temperature, water, certain potting soil, fertilizer, and location. For light, they prefer morning sunlight. They need afternoon shade, especially when we're hitting these 100-degree days. They prefer bright light as a south-facing windows if you're growing them indoors. And if you give them too much direct light, the leaves can scorch, turn brown or white as they bleach out. And then what happens with underlit succulents is they'll start to elongate. This is called etoliation, and they become just long and skinny and scrawny looking. And you can see these don't look quite as nice as the other ones that are growing in their correct format. As far as temperature, most succulents are more cold tolerant than people believe. They prefer daytime temperatures of 70 to 85 and nighttime temps of 50 to 55. If you leave your succulents outside during the winter, you're going to want to protect them. As I usually start using frost cloth at about 40 degrees or less. So the reason for that is I don't want them to get frostbite on that. And that what's not actually frostbite, but it's frost that can damage the leaves. And you can use frost cloth, pillowcases, sheets, or cotton-backed plastic tablecloths to cover them, but you never want to use just pure plastic. That will damage your plants. This plant I took a picture of. It's a sunburst aeonium in August of 2017. And you can see we ended up having, I think we had 20 or 25 days of over 100. And what happens is these weren't in the direct sunlight, but it was just the heat of the day that caused the leaves to brown and scorch. But in October, this same plant was starting to come back. So even if you have a damaged plant, if you leave it until it's growing season, it will do much better. As far as watering, overwatering is a single most cause of death of succulents. They should be watered generously in the summer, but allow them to dry out between waterings. And during the winter, indoor plants should only be watered maybe once, maybe twice a month. And succulents should never sit in water. So signs of overwatering, your plant will become soft and discolored. it may become yellow or white. If you remove the pot or remove the plant from the pot and inspect the roots, if they're brown and rotted, you're going to want to repot that in a drier medium. And if the plant is too far gone, you can try taking a cutting from the mother plant and repot the new cutting. Signs of underwatering: it will stop growing, it could shed its leaves, you may find brown spots on the leaves, and the leaves will appear shriveled. So a healthy crassula or jade plant and a dead leaf. As far as fertilizer, during the summer you can fertilize as you would other house plants. What I like to do is I feed most of my succulents once a month with a 1/4 of water-soluble fertilizer. And that would be something like Miracle Grow. I'll mix it to whatever they recommend. I would do 1/4 the strength of that. Now, another thing you can do is avoid fertilizing during the winter. And you can also mix something like Osmocote into your soil mixture, and that will allow fertilizer to get into your plants for 3 to 6 months. One of my friends, she waters one day and fertilizes at 1/4 strength the following day during the growing season. As far as potting soils, you want something that's in a fast draining mixture, which can be potting soil with added perlite or pumice, or you can purchase a cactus palm, and I think nowadays they even put citrus mix on there. And you can also buy one of these and mix it with some additional perlite or pumice. Perlite floats to the surface pretty easily. Pumice will stay within your soil. It's a little bit denser and heavier. When I work with my succulents, I have certain tools that I use. One of the nicest things is this big black cement tub that you can buy at one of the big box stores. And then when I do demonstrations, I always take a turntable with me so I can work off of that. But some other handy tools are your chopsticks, your long-handled tweezers. And what I like about the tweezers is it lets me get into the plant to remove some dead leaves, to remove dead debris around the plants itself, and to sometimes even lift the plant out of the pot. I also like my various scoops that I can use. And to cover the holes in the pots, I use craft plastic or screen, and one that the master gardeners use all the time are coffee filters. I have different size watering cans that I like to use. And when you get soil on your plants, you can use a paintbrush to remove the soil from the leaves. As far as location goes, most succulents will do well outdoors. They do prefer that morning light, so protect them from the afternoon sunlight because they will scorch. And some of your succulents, like your haworthias and your gasterias, they will prefer shade to bright sunlight. So to propagate succulents, it's very, very easy. Using a sharp knife, snips, or shears, you can cut a leaf, a stem, or a pup from the mother plant. Let it callus or harden for 1 to 2 weeks to prevent rot, and then plant it in a potting mixture. And one thing I want to show you, on this one leaf that was planted, a little plantlet will grow at the bottom of the leaf node. Some people plant their cuttings in only perlite. You can also do what's called plantlet removal. And this is a sempervivum with 2 little babies growing off the sides. You can remove these 2 little babies and plant them in in soil, and they'll grow to look just like the mother plant. You can also do what's called root separation. Here's a Haworthia attenuata, and you can see once it was removed from the pot, you can see the roots underneath. Once this is teased from the mother plant, you can put it in soil immediately. And then again, like I mentioned, you can remove leaves from the plants, let them dry out. After a few weeks to a month, they'll grow some roots and you can plant those. Now, another technique for your plants that have etiolated or gotten really tall and spindly is called beheading. And I'm going to give you a chance if you want to take a picture of this slide. It gives you a YouTube link that will show you in about 5 minutes how you can behead your plants. But I do those for I behead my aeoniums, the echeverias, and just recently I did an agave attenuata because it was getting kind of leggy. Now this was a crested graptopetalum that I beheaded. On the edge of each of these stems was a large graptopetalum, which I removed and I planted in a different container, which I'll show you next. About 2 months later, all these little graptopetalums were growing along the sides of the stems. So once you behead your plant, you want to keep on watering that stem and the plant itself, because eventually it will grow little smaller plants. And remember, I told you I removed those graptopetalums. I planted them in with some assorted echeveria, and here's the 5 graptopetalums that I included in that container. Now, earlier I mentioned that there were summer growers. Your summer growers grow well in the summer. They go dormant in the winter. Your adeniums, they have a lot of a thick caudex with beautiful flowers on them. Your agaves, I've already talked about. Your echeverias, your rosettes, also known as hens and chicks, and your euphorbias and lithops. All of those are your summer growers. Your winter growers are the majority of your succulents, your aeoniums, your aloes, your crassulas, gasterias, haworthias, kalanchoes, sansevierias. So these will grow well in the winter and be dormant in the summer. Now, 2 of my favorite books that I like, one is Succulent Simplified by Deborah Lee Baldwin. Another one that is a great resource is the Complete Book of Cacti and Succulents by Terry Hewitt. I refer to these books quite often when I want to learn more information about them. But I did want you to know that the library has a great assortment of books on cacti and succulents. When I was talking to Laura yesterday, she thought there were about 70 that people could check out. Now, remember I said Deborah Lee Baldwin. I was fortunate enough to meet her at the San Francisco Flower Show a few years ago. And she has quite an interesting website, and you can learn a lot about succulents if you just Google Deborah Lee Baldwin. Now, I did want to share with you a few of my favorite succulents that I'm currently growing. I love these Mexican pots. They really make your succulent shine. But here I have 3 different varieties of Haworthia. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the Sunburst Aeonium is one of my favorites. These are more difficult to find, the Aeonium Emerald, as well as the Mardi Gras Aeonium. I found both of these on the coast. And so if you're taking a trip over to the coast this summer, you might check out some of the nurseries there. These are very hard to find in Fresno. This is a oak barrel that I redid in January. I kept a couple of the larger aloes that I had growing and a few of the clumping haworthias. But what's so nice about these oak barrels is that you can really do a nice display. It also has some Aeonium Schwarzkopf, which are the dark, deep purple ones. Now, this is one of those dinner plate Aeoniums. It's one of the last ones that I have of it, but I wanted to share with you what happens when it flowers. That rosette begins to change and it develops a very long stalk, a flower stalk. This is what that flower stalk will look like, and it will last for about a month. And this is a little bit more of a close-up of it. But this plant will die afterwards. I'm going to try beheading it right about here underneath the leaves and see if I can get anything to pup along the stem. But I did try it with a previous one and I did not have any luck. And for those of you that are wondering what this plant is, it's called a Bocarnia, also known as a ponytail palm, also known as an elephant's foot. And the reason being is this part looks like the bottom of an elephant's foot. Another one of my favorites are the kiwi Aeonium. And one of the gals that I work with, Melanie Sarkissian, she and I have taught classes on how to make these containers. They're called hypertufa containers. You can make them out of perlite and peat moss and potting soil and cement. And they create some really nice containers for your succulents. Now, I did want to share with you a new love. These are some of my favorite cacti. I've grown really fond of these Rebutias. They're grown in the Andes, in Bolivia and Argentina. And from the end of March through the middle of June, they will send out these profuse flowers. And when I was talking about fertilizing, I water these once a week in the summertime or during that growing season, the flowering season. And I do dilute the fertilizer to 1/4 strength. And I think that's the reason why I have such a profuse amount of flowers growing on these. Here's a Rebutia Pipes of Peace and a Rebutia Sunrise. And this was the Rebutia Pipes of Peace just a few weeks ago. Another one of my favorite is a Nodocactus Worcesteri, and these will put out just beautiful flowers all summer through September, October. And a Gymnocalcium. They will produce beautiful pink, white, or red flowers. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Do you have any questions that you'd like me to answer?
Thank you, Roz. What a fantastic presentation. The first thing I want to do is reassure everyone that we are recording this program and it will be posted on the Fresno County Library website and the Master Gardeners. So don't panic if you missed some of those slides and it moved really quick. Let's get some questions going. Let's see, a question is, and I'm going to mispronounce this, I have a calicoe in bloom right now. Will it flower again this summer? If so, what should I do so that it will?
You know, my recommendation would be while it's flowering now is when you water it to fertilize it. And I'm not sure, it depends on, remember, there are quite a few varieties of your kalanchoes. Some will flower only one time, some may flower more often than that. With your aloes, they only flower once. It's with my cactus that I get multiple flowerings.
Here's a really good question. How do you identify succulents? Obviously, you were going through, some of these had what, up to 1,100 or 500 variants. And is there a good key or website or method of identification you'd recommend?
You know, once you start, first of all, see if you can, when you're buying your succulents, if it comes with a tag, and keep that tag with the plant so you can identify it. Because sometimes when you go to repot it, you take that name tag out of the plant and then you've lost it and you have no clue what it is. But I would recommend also getting a couple of library books or going out and purchasing some books on succulents. And what you'll start to notice is that many of them have similar features, like the haworthias. If they're striped or they have dots on them, that most likely is a haworthia. There's a website called Glasshouse Works that you can look through to help you identify it, but you basically need to know which species it's from. Is it an aloe? Is it a crassula? Because otherwise you're spending a lot of time leafing through books trying to find them. If you have friends that grow succulents, you might ask them, and sometimes you can call into the helpline and they may be able to help you identify those different succulents.
Okay, we're getting a lot of questions coming in here. I'm a new to gardening and succulents. When you propagate, does this mean you cut the plant from the root to transplant?
Not all the time, although there are times that you can separate it right at the base of the plant. But remember what I said to do. If you're going to, for instance, if I wanted to take part of this tree aloe, I would go all the way down to the bottom and make a sharp cut on the where it attaches to the stem. I would let that callus over for a few days before I plant it. With the kiwi aeonium, I would try to, I don't want to cut it right underneath the rosette itself. If there's a little bit of a stem, I like cutting it at the stem so that once it calluses over, I can stick that right into the soil to have it grow.
Someone asked if you could maybe in the chat box type out the ID website that you just referred to.
You know what? I'll have to look that up. I don't have it handy, but if you look at Glasshouse Works, I think it's glasshouseworks.com. That should be the link to finding many, many different succulents.
Okay. Someone asked that they have an aloe, and you say this is a winter grower, but they're having pups growing right now. So what's going on with that flower, with that plant?
Well, aloes, when you say it's a winter grower, it does its best in the fall and the spring. And so right now things are propagating. Aloes are producing pups, but they will shut down during the hottest months of June, July, and August. They'll still continue to grow and still continue to need some water, but that is their more dormant time of the year.
Here's a good one. Are there any succulents rabbits and squirrels will not eat? I live in the foothills and they are demolishing my plants.
You know, that's really tough. The only thing I can think of is that you might put some sort of netting around there so that they don't eat them. But yeah, that's a problem with living up in the foothills with all of your succulents, because they're so watery and fleshy that those animals tend to like them.
Another
One you
question.
might not have as much of a problem with might be some of these sempervivum. They may not eat too many of those.
Okay. I think it's interesting. I noticed in a lot of your plants that you have different succulents intermixed. A lot of times one plant will overtake another. Is that not as true with succulents? Can you put different kinds together?
You probably want to plant your winter growers and your summer growers separately. Although you did see that I did do an echeveria plant, and I did put graptopetalums in there with them. Sometimes they'll do well, but if you're going to water your succulents more often in the summer, like your echeverias, your euphorbias, you don't want to really mix them with your aloes and some of your other ones. And what I found is, like in this strawberry pot, I put all sempervivum. I put all one variety. I have some other strawberry pots where I have a ton of aloes growing, and I have another one where I have aeoniums growing. So I've tried to keep similar water needs of plants together.
Wonderful. Martha asks, Gasteria has purplish areas. Is that due to overwatering?
The gasterias are a little bit more, they have some problems during the winter time where they'll get some black marks on them. They usually will dissipate by the summertime, but I'm not familiar with them getting purple spots on them. I'm not familiar with what that would be.
Let's see, from your experience for the brand new grower, is there a good succulent or two you'd recommend that's harder to kill?
If you look at the aeoniums, I love the aeoniums. They're really easy to grow. As a matter of fact, I put them in the ground this year, and I planted them in January. And I was amazed at how well they took off, how well they propagated and added new plants to it. And, the aeoniums would be one that I would definitely get. Although remember, the kiwi and the sunburst are a little bit harder to find, but your green and your Schwarzkopf, which are those dark purple ones, those are really, really hardy. And unless you really overwatered them, I would think that you would have a hard time killing them. Now, I do want to make one thing about the aeoniums. During the summertime, this is very, very natural for them. The rosettes will close up. They'll get a lot of dry leaves on the bottoms of them, and that's just natural growth of summertime for the aeoniums. I have a lot of luck with aloes and the haworthias. So if I had to recommend 3 plants, aeoniums, aloes, haworthias are some of the easiest to grow.
Wonderful. Amy says, do you have care for an agave I just bought ATT.
Attenuata.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, what was the question about the agave attenuata?
Just the care for it.
Okay,
care.
so it's a beautiful plant. It's a very supple plant compared to your other ones that are very stiff with those sharp spines on the end. My neighbor has it in a south-facing patio, and it gets covered by it gets covered all day long. So it's pretty much in shade, although it gets a lot of indirect sunlight. I have mine growing under shade cloth, about 50% shade cloth, and it does fairly well. If you put that agave attenuata out in your garden and it gets afternoon sun, it will burn the leaves. And so that's one that you really want to protect and either give it early morning sunshine and definitely afternoon shade.
Okay, Gina has 2 huge agaves that are in bloom. What should I do?
Enjoy them while they're in bloom. What will happen is those blooms can last from 1 to 3 to 6 months. So it depends on how large that agave is. If it's one that's like 6 foot across, that that flower stalk will be there for about 6 months. But what will happen is the plant will die. It will send up or send out offshoots or pups, even up to 6 or 10 feet away from the mother plant. So look for that in your garden, if it's in a garden. If it's in a planter, if it's in a planter, it might the flower will probably die sooner than 6 months.
Can you recommend a homemade potting mixture?
What I did in the past was I used regular potting soil mixed with either perlite or pumice. And at one point I was adding sand to the mixture. And then I talked with numerous people who grow succulents. And one of the fellows in the Fresno Cactus and Succulent Society, depending on the plant that he's growing, will have a mixture of 25% perlite, 75% potting soil, or 50% perlite, 50% potting soil. And with some that are more cactus, like 75% pumice or pumice or perlite, and 25% potting soil. But lately what I've been doing is I've been buying the succulent mix or the cactus mix and adding pumice to it. And that gives me a really good fast draining mixture.
Any recommended places to purchase the Talavera pottery?
No, over at the coast, I found some. I think you can get it at different local nurseries, but the Mexican or Talavera pots are just beautiful for your plants. If you can make a trip to Mexico, you could probably buy them pretty inexpensively.
Okay, and Roz, maybe this would be a good time to bring up your next program and what's upcoming with the Master Gardeners.
Yeah, let me share a few other slides with you guys. So some upcoming classes. Next week, I'll be doing Sassy Succulents, which is part 2 of Under the Spell of Succulents. I'll be talking about containers and crafts that you can do, as well as I'm going to talk a little bit about landscape, and I'm also going to talk about houseplants. On June 5th, Annie Dahl will be doing gardening with herbs. On June 19th, I'll be doing the 3rd part of the Successful Succulents, What's Eating My Plants. That will be the pests that attack succulents. And on July 10th, Robbie Cranch will do gardening with houseplants. And on July 17th, Sharon Matson will talk about hummingbirds in your garden. And then for those that are interested, in October, I'll be doing a succulent pumpkin demonstration, and that will be in person at the Woodward Park Library. And to register for those classes, you go to fresnolibrary.libcal.com. If you'd like to take a photograph of this so you can see what classes are coming up, I'll give you a minute to do that.
And you can always call any branch while we're open to get this information as well, or go online to fresnolibrary.org.
And Laura, I did want to say, someone was confused a little bit about our master gardener or becoming a master gardener. These classes that we're doing are what used to be called our adult education classes that we offered at the Garden of the Sun, or different locations throughout Fresno County. But they do not qualify for making you a master gardener. So if you want to become a master gardener, due to COVID, we did not have a training class in 2021, but our next training class will be in 2023. And just to let you know the difference, the training class to become a master gardener, it's a 16-week training class with 4 hours a day. The applications will be available starting in June 2022. Interviews will be in September of 2022, and the selection of the master gardener class will be in October, with the class beginning in January of 2023. But I also wanted to share with you a few master gardener resources. This first link will take you to the Fresno Master Gardener website. And that's where all of these recordings of these Master Gardener classes will be, so you can find them, as well as a lot of other information about Master Gardeners. If you have a question to ask the Master Gardener, you can contact them at the helpline, which is at this link. And if you want to get updated announcements of upcoming events, you can sign up right here. If you'd like to take a shot of this slide, you may, if you want to have these links available to you.
Thank you, Roz. There's some really great information on those websites.
One last thing that I want to share is Tim Sullivan did a Drought 2021 workshop on May 1st. That was really informational for those of you that were able to attend. But I did want to share with you 10 things that you can do to conserve water. We are in a severe drought. We're getting about 5% of our allotment of water. And I have a feeling this is the future of gardening in California. But what you can do to conserve water is buy plants that are zone 8 or 9. Add mulch to your garden bed. 3, 4, 6 inches of mulch will retain water in your for your plants. Control the weeds, and if you add mulch to your garden, it will automatically control your weeds. Water in the morning, and Laura, you had asked me about watering in the morning, and so I wanted to share with you that the reason being is that the water goes down to the roots, and it will prevent your plants from wilting during the heat of the afternoon. You want to plant plants with similar water needs. You don't want to plant your petunias next to your cactus. Water deeply, less often, and let your roots dry out between waterings. If you're going to add any kind of amendment, do it evenly and deeply into the soil. And if it's something like manure that you want to add to your vegetable garden, it's recommended that you do that 1 month before you plant your plants. You can replace your lawn with drought-tolerant plants, but this is not the time of the year to do that. It would have been good to do that in January, February, March, but now that it's getting too warm, you'd end up watering your plants now just as much as you would during the summer. So a good time to replace that would be in the fall. Avoid over-fertilizing. That produces a lot of greenery in your plants. And then sweep your walkways and driveways. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody who attended today, and hope that you'll be here next week to see the different kinds of containers that you can put your plants in, as well as some easy crafts that you can do with succulents. So Laura, thank you very, very much.
Thank you
For hosting our growing with the Master Gardener series.
Oh, you're welcome. This has been a pleasure and it's been a lot of fun, and we have a lot coming down the road. So I hope everyone will be here to enjoy these. We've got to, now remember, the next succulent program will be next Saturday. Our programs have been spaced every other week. This is the exception. So this will be next week, and you can sign up and register for that program now. And thank you, and everyone have a good weekend.